Let's talk about how Germany and the wider EU's trade relationship with India is changing, particularly in the light of Western sanctions against Russia and the deteriorating relationship between the European Union and China. I'm joined by our correspondent in Delhi, Charu Kartikeya, to talk this through. Thanks for being with us. Charu, has India taken on a new trade role for Germany in particular as tensions between Europe and China have increased?
Well, that does appear to be the case right now, Rob. Some very interesting details in the figures that have been recently released by Germany's Federal Statistics Department. These figures show that from January to July only this year, Germany imported goods worth more than 8 billion euros from India. Now, that's an increase of 1.7% on a year to year basis. And if you look at a 5 year window, that is from 2017 to 2022, this means that Germany's imports from India have almost doubled. That's a massive hike. That's a massive hike in the trade relationship. And that's just imports. Exports is just another story. Exports to India from Germany went up by more than 21%. I mean, this brings India really close to Germany in terms of the trade relationship. And now, in the ranking of the most important recipients of Germany's exports, India now ranks ahead of Brazil and Canada. So that's just a dramatic change in the picture as far as the German-Indian trade relationship is concerned, Rob.
Yeah, and that's how the numbers bear it out. But where does this become tangible? What sorts of things are now flying back and forth between these countries that weren't or are doing in greater volumes?
Well, what these figures suggest that this growth is largely due to higher imports of oil products. These are mostly refined petroleum products, that is, products that you get after refining crude oil. And these figures suggest that imports of oil products increased more than 12 times in this period, from January to July this year. There were 37 million euros. They were worth 37 million euros earlier, and in July they went up to 451 million euros. These are mainly gas oil imports. So apart from that, garments is also a major sector that has been identified in this report. Clothing was the most important product, accounting for 1 billion euros. So largely, these two appear to be the centerpiece of this evolving relationship.
Well, let's talk about oil products in particular, actually, because that has been a source of controversy. It really sort of kicked off earlier this year, around sort of May, when there were accusations from within the EU that India was essentially sending Europe Russian oil products. It was buying these products from Russia, refining them, and then selling them on to the EU, essentially helping Russia to get its way around sanctions. So, I mean, where are we with that debate now?
Well, you see, Europe, Rob, ever since the war began and the West imposed its sanctions on Russia, the West has been criticizing India ever since of continuing to engage with Russia, continuing to buy oil, and that too at discounted rates from Russia. But what reports have been suggesting over the past several months, that this crude oil that India has been buying from Russia, India refines it, and then European buyers have been buying these refined products in big numbers. Now, this exploded, as you mentioned rightly so, in May for the first time this year, when the European Union's foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell, flagged this. And he said that this amounts to a circumventing of the Western sanctions, and especially the EU's sanctions against Russia, and something must be done about this. But what these figures released by the German Federal Statistics Department reveal is that Joseph Borrell was right, and this has indeed been happening. Now look at the figures. Imports of oil products have increased by more than 12 times, from 37 million euros to 451 million euros. Now, what experts are saying, that this is not illegal. But what Ukraine has always alleged, that this is immoral and it must be stopped.
I remember the way that the Indian government has defended against this is to say that, yes, sure, we refined this oil, but once you refine it past a certain point, even the EU's own rules mean that it is no longer Russian oil once you've changed it to that degree. Does that argument seem to have, enabled India to continue this practice?
Yeah, well, Rob, India has been making a couple of points. First of all, when it was accused of helping Russia by buying Russian oil and that to a discounted rates, India said that as a developing country, it had huge energy needs. So therefore, it will do whatever needed to be done in the interest of its people and in the interest of providing affordable energy to its people. So that was the first argument that India gave. And eventually, when the West started criticizing about helping Russia buying oil. Then the argument shifted to the consumption of Europe's energy needs from Russia as well. That was last year. When that situation also changed, then this picture came about that eventually the crude oil that India is buying from Russia is sort of making its way into Europe as well through a sort of a backdoor by these refined products. And India has said that this is absolutely legal because to quote India's foreign minister S Jaishankar himself, he said that what the mandate says is that when crude oil is refined substantively, then its origin doesn't really matter. I mean, when Russian crude oil is refined, it ceases to be Russian crude oil. It is just refined products which are going from India to Europe. So India has always maintained that it's not violating any international sanctions.
Is there a feeling in India that the country is kind of winning out of the Western sanctions against Russia? Because not only is it getting Russian oil cheaper because Russia can't sell it to the US or it can't sell it to the EU, but also it's able to sell into those two markets in a way that it couldn't before?
Absolutely, Rob. That indeed is the narrative, and now, in fact, there's a narrative that is also emerging. That now, what will Europe say about these figures that reveal that Europe in its is also effectively also buying Russian oil through a backdoor? Now, will that criticism against India now cease because Europe is also buying this oil? India, of course, has hugely benefited in all this while. There have been huge discounts, Indian importers have gained tremendously. And now, because of refining and selling, because of the ability to refine and sell these products in huge numbers to Europe, India has definitely profited from these entire circumstances over the last almost 1.5 years, Rob.
Do you think the EU is sort of okay with that to some extent because Russia is only able to sell its Russia at a cut price to India, and also at the same time, Europe is managing to get hold of oil products?
I mean, it really is up to Europe now to take a call on this, Rob, because as I said, that Joseph Borrell said this in way back in May that this is wrong and this must be stopped. Ukraine has always been protesting, recognizing that this is legal, but saying that this is immoral. It amounts to funding Russia's war. But in spite of flagging it, the fact that European Union has not been able to do much about it, it only goes on to say that this is likely to continue unless the sanctions are reworded, unless fresh sanctions are imposed, and unless this specific case of stopping the entry of refined products into Europe is implemented, Rob.
So there's clearly a point of tension there over the oil products situation. But more overall, is the EU-India trade relationship one that's expected to be increasingly important as we move forward?
Well, that certainly is the case. And both these factors, as you mentioned earlier, have been contributing to this. One is, of course, the war in Ukraine. And the other is the growing wariness in Europe as far as its relationship with China is concerned. We have seen there's a global shift in narrative, and there is a hunt across economies of the world to look at other alternatives as compared to China as far as trade is concerned. Whether that shift is already happening or not, that's a different story because you need to look at figures in different sectors to be able to establish that narrative. For example, there's still a significant gap between Europe China trade and Europe India trade. So it will depend upon how soon is India able to fill that gap, and how soon is Europe able to shift its focus in a big way from China to India for its trade needs.
Big questions that are going to play themselves out over the next decade or so. Charu Kartikeya in Delhi, thank you so much for taking us through all of this in such detail.